everyone! Today is your first day of two-dimensional arrays. A two-dimensional array is just like a one-dimensional array, except that instead of being a list of values, it's like a two-dimensional grid of values. So here we have a two-dimensional int array that's 3 rows and 3 columns. Just like any other data type in Java, you don't have to make it a grid of int values. You could make it a grid of strings if you wanted to, or the simulation you just finished, we had a field that was a two-dimensional grid of rabbit objects. Today I'm going to show you how you can create a grid, how you can put numbers into it, how you can display it so you can see what's in it, and then next time we'll talk about looping over it in more complicated ways. Alright. Don't type along with me, instead just watch for about 2 minutes and then I'll tell you when you can type along. So I've made a class called ArrayTester. Here's how you create an array. So just like if I wanted to create an int called n, I would do that. If I want to create a two-dimensional grid, I say int, and then I have 2 square brackets, and I'll call mine array, like this. Notice that this entire thing is the data type. It is the type of data that this variable array is going to hold. It's a two-dimensional int array. But this is only declaring the variable. I haven't actually made a grid yet. You can tell because, like, how big is it supposed to be? You can't tell. So the way you actually tell it to make a grid with a specific size is you would say new int, and then you'd have 2 square brackets, but you put a number inside each one of these brackets. First, how many rows should it have? And then how many columns should it have? So here I'm going to make something with 3 rows and 2 columns. Just to be clear, this is a row. This horizontal list is a row. This vertical list is a column. Alright, well it would be great to actually see what this looks like before we do anything else. So I'm going to show you a kind of a bad way to do it first, and then a slightly longer, slightly better way to do it second. So system.out.println, it would be nice if we could just say array like this, and it would just display the two-dimensional grid like a grid. Unfortunately, we can't do that. So instead, I'm going to type arrays with a capital A, and then a command called deep toString. And then I'm going to give it my array as input. What deep toString does is it will take my two-dimensional array and convert it into a string so that I can display it. You're going to have to hover over arrays and say import so that you get this import statement up here, otherwise it's not going to work. Alright, let's see what it looks like. So I run it. So I said we had 3 rows and 2 columns. So this is the top row, this is my middle row, and this is my bottom row. Unfortunately, it's not really displayed like a nice 2D grid because it's all kind of here on one line. If I wanted to add more rows, I could make this a 5. And then when I run it again, you see that now there are 5 rows, and there's still each of them 2 columns. I think this is going to be easier, though, if we can actually see it like a two-dimensional grid. So I'll comment this out and show you how to do that. We're going to make a for loop where we loop over every single row in the two-dimensional grid. So I'm going to create a loop variable called row that starts at 0, and I'm going to say row is less than array.length. Remember, array is the name of my two-dimensional array. Array.length is the number of rows in my array. And then I'm going to add 1 every time. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a string called myRow, and I'm going to say array row. Except I need to convert it into a string. So I'll say arrays.toString array row. Okay, don't freak out. I'm going to tell you what each piece here means. So array row, this is asking my two-dimensional array to give me the entire row that corresponds to this number. If we look back at the picture, all the rows are numbered starting at 0. So if I say row 0, it's going to give me this whole row. If I say row 1, it'll give me that whole row. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying let's start at row 0 and let's count up 1 row at a time. And I'm going to ask the array to give me that row. This converts it into a string so that I can display it. And then all system.out.println my row. So this code right here should display it in an actual, like 1 row at a time in an actual nice 2D grid. And when I run it, you see now I've got 5 rows and 2 columns. If I wanted to change this back to 3 rows and 3 columns and then run it again, now you see it displays as 3 rows and 3 columns that are full of zeros. Alright, at this time you should pause the video and type what I've got to make sure that you can get it, and then fiddle around yourself a little bit changing these numbers and predicting what dimensions the grid is going to look like, and then make sure that it looks like that. Okay, give it a try. Alright, I'm going to show you 2 different ways to put numbers into the grid. So here's the first way. You use the name of your array, and then you tell it the exact row and column that you want to put a number in. So I'm going to put a number in row 0, column 0, which should be the upper left-hand corner. So this is the location I want to place a number into. I'm going to put the number 99 in there. So if you run it now, if you look up in the upper left-hand corner, I've put 99. Let's change it a little bit. This is row 1, column 0. And when I run it, see the 99 has moved down 1 because this is row 0, this is row 1. But I'm still in column 0 because I haven't moved over 1 yet. So every time the column increases, you move to the right by 1. Every time the row increases, you move down by 1. Just to test it out again, to make sure we know what's going on, I'm going to now place 99 in row 0, column 1. Predict in your head, where do you think this is going to go? And there it is. I'm in row 0, but I'm in column 1. So if you want to, you can fill the whole grid this way with whatever numbers you want. So there's -10, here's 2 and 1, this will be 5. And if I run it, you see a bunch of values in there. If I try and put something in a location that doesn't exist, you can probably guess because it's the same error that we had when it was one-dimensional arrays. So here, row 3 doesn't exist. And it says array index out of bounds exception 3, because this number 3 is the location I was trying to access that actually doesn't exist. You might think, wait a minute, there's supposed to be 3 rows, right? So why doesn't location 3 exist? It's the same thing it always is. When you start numbering at 0, the 3rd row actually has a location number of 2. See, 0, 1, 2. So keep that in mind and have a picture ready to help you when you're thinking about your own problems. Here's another quick test for yourself. Go ahead and make your array have 2 rows. No, let's have you make 7 rows and 5 columns. I'd like you to add 4 lines of code here that will put the number 99 in each of the 4 corners of this grid. So the upper left-hand corner, you know, should be row 0, column 0. Decide what you have to type in for the other ones to put the number 99 into the upper right, lower left, and lower right. Okay, give it a try, and you'll see the answer in a second. And here's the solution. 0, 4, 6, 0, and 6, 4. And when I run it, you see I've got 99 in all 4 corners. Alright, there's a different way of filling a grid with numbers. Instead of creating it empty and then putting in numbers one at a time, you can put all the numbers in at once. And here's how you can do it. You use the curly brace, like this. If I was making a one-dimensional list, I could do this. It's a list of 3 numbers. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to make a list of each row. So this is going to be row 0, and then I'll have a comma, and then I'll have row 1, and then I'll have a comma, and this will be row 2. So row 0, I'm going to have the numbers 1, 2, 3. Row 1, which is the middle row, I'll have 4, 5, 6. And then the bottom row, I'll have the numbers 7, 8, 9. If you like to, you can also organize it this way so that it actually looks like a 2-dimensional grid. Just pay close attention to where do the opening and closing braces happen and where do the commas happen. If you look at it this way, I've got 3 separate lists, and each list has got an opening and a closing brace, and each of my lists is separated by a comma. Alright, let's run it and see what it looks like. There you go. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, just the way that it appears that I entered it here. So if you know the values that you want to put into your array to start with, this is a much more direct way to do it. Here's your next challenge. It's an interactive program which will display a grid and ask the user to enter a row number. So for example, 1. Enter a column number, 1. Enter a number to put in the grid, 99. And there you see it's added the number that I wanted in the place I wanted. If I want to add something in row and column 2, and it's going to be -10, there it is. Let's do row 0, column 1, the number 77, and there it is. So, I'm going to get you started on this, and then you're going to finish it up on your own. So the first thing that I want to do is be able to get some user input. I think the best thing for this is scanner. So I'll type scanner input equals new scanner, system.in, and you will probably have to hover over this to import scanner from javax.swing, no, from java.util, up here. In case you forgot how this works, I could type system.out.println, enter a row number, and then if I want to get a user input, I can say the name of the scanner, which is input, and then tell it to run the method nextInt. So when this runs, it's going to pause and wait until I type something and then the carriage return, and then it will save that into row. So that's how you're going to get your user input. As you remember, this is how we were displaying our array. It's going to be convenient if we make this our own command, make it a method. So let's cut this whole thing. And then outside of main, here's where main starts, here's where main ends. Outside of main, I'm going to make a new method. Public static void. I'm going to call it display. And the input to my method should be a two-dimensional array called array. Notice how this is exactly the same as how I declared my array in the first place. Int bracket bracket array. That's because this is the data type, that's the variable name. This is the data type for the input to my method, that's the variable name. I can go ahead and paste the code in there, and now I've got this nice display method. So whenever I want to display an array, I can just say display array, and the array that I have up here, I give it as the input to my method, it gets copied into this input variable, and then I run through this code which I already know displays it. Alright, so we're almost there. The only thing you have to do is make a for loop to loop a bunch of times, display the array, ask them for a row, ask user for a column, ask user what number to put in the grid, and then as the last step, you just need to say array, and then decide what to put in here as the row location and the column location, and then what to put here as the number that gets assigned there. Good luck! This is the first thing you're going to turn into Project Wombat. For your second program, I'd like you to do something that's like a guessing game. So you're going to start by generating a random row and column number and putting the number 99 into your secretly created row and column. This is the secret number that the player is trying to find. Now you're going to loop 5 times, and just like in the last program, you're going to ask the player to type a row and a column number. Only this time, you're going to have an if statement that's something like this. You'll say if the array where the player typed their row and their column, if that's equal to 99, then it must be that they guessed the right spot, in which case you'll tell them that they got it and you'll display the array to show them. Otherwise, it must mean that they guessed wrong, and so you'll tell them that they missed it and display how many guesses that they have left. Good luck. This is your program number 2. Last, let's make a two-dimensional grid of strings instead of ints and see where that gets us. So here, where I created an int 2D array, you can change that to be string. And instead of saying new int 3x3, you'll say new string 3x3. We can go ahead and still call it array, that's fine. Alright, so now this is a 3x3 grid of string objects. Let's do this. Let's say, let's loop 10 times. And I'm just going to fill the grid with 2 random letters, either A or B. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a random row and column. So math.random times 3, and then int column, math.random times 3. And then I'll say at the row and column. Well, let's do this. Let's just put an X there to begin with. And then, oh, I deleted my display code. Okay, I'm going to do a different display code that I'm going to explain to you more on Wednesday. I'm going to loop through all the rows. But then I'm also going to loop through all the columns. And I'm going to print what's at the array, at the row and the column, followed by a space. Alright, so let's see what this looks like. Remember, all this down here, don't worry about it so much. This is just displaying it. And this is the part that we care about. I'm looping 10 times, generating random rows and columns, and putting an X there. So here's an interesting thing. You see I've got a couple of X's in different spots, but I've also got this thing called null. Remember, null is a special value that means you haven't created an object there yet. So that's to be expected. If I loop 100 times, surely I'm going to hit all the spots. There we go. All right, so if you loop randomly enough, you're definitely going to hit every single row and column. So now it's full of X's. I want to do that same thing, only now I'm going to say if math.random is less than 0.5. If it's less than 0.5, I'm going to put an A there. Otherwise, I'm going to put a B there. So let's think about what this is going to do. I generate a random location first. Math.random is somewhere between 0 and 1, so it's got a 50% chance of being less than a half and a 50% chance of being greater than a half. So it seems like I've got a 50% chance of putting an A there and a 50% chance of putting a B there. If I run it, you see I've got some random A's and B's, and if I run it again, more random A's and B's. Cool. If I want to, I can make this even larger. Let's make it 10 by 10. Means I got to change all these also. It's more exciting, I think, when it's larger. Oh, I still got a bunch of nulls in here, though. So I'm going to loop a whole bunch of times to be sure that I hit all the possibilities. So now I've got really big randomly generated grids of letters. Alright, well, you can play around with this for the rest of the block. We'll do some other interesting things with this later on. If you ran out of things to do, a great thing to consider would be trying to figure out how does this double for loop work, and thinking about what could you do to maybe loop through all of the spots in row 0, for example. Okay, good luck. I'll see you on Wednesday.